good to go.
Great. Yeah, so this project, it was funded by the Island Coastal Economic Trust. You can see our sponsors on the bottom, and just some of the people who were involved, some of the organizations that were involved, including ICANN. But this is really a Cortes Community Economic Development Association project, CCEDA, otherwise known as CCEDA, which applied for the funding. We've got a couple of board members here, Dwayne and Lisa. You know, there was a call put out funding, and we decided to go for it, because really transportation, passenger transportation was an issue for Cortes, especially getting across Quadra to the essential services in Campbell River. And so there's also just getting around Cortes, and on Quadra, we're hearing too that getting around Quadra is an issue for a lot of people affordably, and considering climate, and so on. So this was just a good project to take on, and CCEDA seemed to be the right fit for us. So we decided to go for it, and we were successful. So this started about 6 months ago, and we have to wrap it up on October 1st. So it's just been a really tight timeline. It's just been it's been really a pleasure to work with our project team, but we're looking forward to wrapping it up too. So I'll just move on. Yeah, let's just see how I can get this. Oh, there we go. And just wanted to acknowledge that we are on the traditional treaty and unceded traditional territories of the Weewaikam, Tla'amin, Hamalko, and Kalahus First Nations, and yeah. So just to recap, I think actually Jen is going to we have already provided this information. We've already done a virtual and in-person presentation of the first phase of this project, which was completed in June. We started with the survey, and Jen's just going to take us through the next few slides on the recap of phase 1.
Yeah, so we're just going to move through this quickly because some of you will have already heard this, maybe even more than once. But for the project, we actually started with a learning forum, which a few of you attended, where we found out what's happening in other communities in terms of passenger transportation. So we invited a few different communities to speak about their community buses. And so that was really interesting to hear what other communities are doing and to start off our project. We did the survey, like Kate said, in May. We also did a community meeting on Quadra, on Cortes, and on Zoom. And we did a number of stakeholder interviews. So we really reached out to try to get a sense of what people's needs were in terms of passenger transportation. So this is a really quick snapshot of the survey results, because the survey was the way we reached the highest number of people. So we had 282 responses, and as you can see, there's people responding from Quadra, Cortes, the outer islands, as well as other people, other places, because we really wanted to get a chance to hear from people who come here as visitors. Okay, Kate, can you advance the slide, please?
Sure. Sorry, there we go.
No, that's great. Thank you. So one of the questions that we asked in the survey, which was really important for us to hear about, was how likely are you or someone in your household to use the following services for a reasonable fee? And we tried to list like everything that we could think of in terms of passenger transportation that might be available on our islands. And so of all the respondents, you can see that having a bus on Quadra was the most popular thing that people wanted. So, and that included, when we broke down the results between people living on Cortes and people living on Quadra, even people on Cortes were more interested in a bus on Quadra than a bus on Cortes, although they were obviously also interested in a bus on Cortes. And then other things that people were really interested in were things like ride sharing, which is like carpooling, and having a taxi on Quadra was also really popular. And ride hailing is very similar to a taxi. I have a feeling that a lot of people didn't really know what a ride hail was, but ride hail is like Uber, where it's like a taxi, it's door to door, but you're using an app to get your taxi rather than the phone or just hailing them on the corner. So yeah, so that's the snapshot in terms of what was people wanted the most from our survey. You can move ahead. So we took all the results from the survey and we put them into an evaluation matrix. And I know you can't see this, and it's, it's something we don't need to deal with the complexity today, but certainly we can share this with you. But basically, we took all of the different options, and we also included an electric bus versus a gas bus on Quadra, and we rated them against many different, like 24 different criteria related to the demand, the service itself, the logistics, social and environmental factors, all the things that we could think of to help us determine which options would be the best for us to implement. And, just what we could do quickly, what we could actually achieve financially, all of those different things. There was just so many things we were trying to consider. So now Kate is going to share the top 4 priorities that emerged from all of this analysis.
Yeah, so based on the analysis that we did, these are the 4 things that really stood out for us, and just based on what everybody else was saying. And so, a bus loop on Quadra, including ferries, a shuttle on Cortes, ride hailing for both islands, and ride sharing for both islands. And I'm going to drill down into each one of these things for you. And just a little mention that we did bring these 4 top options to quite a few different groups, and just to get their feedback on that. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but just so that you know that we did sort of bring this back to focus groups and stakeholders. So, these are the groups that we consulted with in phase 2, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. I'm just going to get into the recommended next steps on how do we implement these 4 options. So, and what we want to do is take those 4 options and try them out in a pilot project in spring, summer of 2025. And whatever we learn from that project, that pilot project, we can apply to a more longer term service in the more distant future. And that pilot project and any project is really dependent upon whatever funding we can find, and I'll talk about that as well. So what would the pilot project that we're thinking about doing and hoping to get funding for, what would that look like? And this is again in spring and summer of next year. So looking at the 4 options, the first one we'll look at is the bus loop on Quadra, including the ferries. So the details on that, like, we're still working them out. Like, it will depend, what this looks like will depend upon, again, what kind of funding we can get, but it's either going to be a 12-hour or a 6-hour schedule on Quadra, aligned with the Cortes ferry arrivals and departures. The route will be a loop around Quadra, including the ferry terminals. And we're looking at a maximum 15-passenger van of some kind. So now this is the 12-hour schedule that we're suggesting. So you can see that there's 10 loops. It starts at 7:25 in the morning, and this is based on the summer schedule for the Cortes ferries, and it goes until the last drop off is at 7:05 at night. So yeah, don't get too hung up on these details. This is just a suggestion, and then you know, if we can pull off and get enough funding for something like that, great. But we also have an option for a 6 hour. And so much of the middle part of the schedule of the day has been taken out. Oh, sorry. How do we get back? Maybe I'm just, yeah, so I'm not quite sure how to go back, but that's okay. I think you saw it. It's just a suggestion. We can go back there if somebody wants to look at that some more. But this is the route on Quadra Island. Again, it's just a suggestion. There's the red line is kind of like, that's the route for between the ferries, and then between ferries, between Cortes Island, you know, arrivals and departures, there would be time to do loops around Quadra Island, and that's the blue route, and the brown route down to Cape Mudge Village area. So we can go back to this if anyone would like to. I'm going to just move on to the next slide. So pros and cons about the bus on Quadra. Yeah, it's just kind of a busy slide, but basically, the great thing about it is that you only need one driver at a time to transport many people. And there have been people have been saying it's hard to find drivers sometimes, especially for the taxi on Quadra. I think that was one of the issues with the Quadra taxi. They didn't have enough drivers. But this way we can transport many people with one driver. The other good thing is that there's a regular schedule offering reliable and affordable transportation. It's more affordable for the passenger as opposed to ride hailing or a taxi. And there's lots of funding available for passenger van purchases out there. There's a great deal of funding out there from the provincial and federal governments. The not so great things is that, we don't know if we can get enough reliable drivers to operate a van bus. They need to have their class 4 driver's license, for example. And it might require subsidies to make it affordable. We probably would need a coordinator to try and make it work, the whole program. And maintenance cost tends to be kind of high for vans and buses. We learned this from the various other communities who have had a community bus, including Gabriola. And then there's no door-to-door service for passengers with a bus. So I'm just going to move on. Jen, I don't know if you're monitoring the chat, if there's any questions. Okay, great. So the next option that we wanted to drill down into is for the pilot project is a shuttle on Cortes. So basically it's a shuttle, right? So it's not like a regular bus service. So we're looking at offering limited scheduled service, possibly using the Hollyhock van. We've been talking to them and they're open to figuring something out on that. So that's kind of nice. It includes service to and from the ferry terminal, the first and last ferry. It includes at least one loop around the island, and the rate per passenger is dependent on funding, but we'd like to keep it affordable. And it would complement instead of compete with the Cluhus bus. So for example, like the Cluhus bus goes on the second ferry, for example, and we would want this one to go on the first ferry. So just to keep the Cluhus bus viable and not compete with it. So I think everyone, well, people on Cortes kind of know the main routes on Cortes, but I'm just kind of showing you where this bus would go. Obviously, we would need to go to Whaletown, where the ferry terminal is, Manson's, Cortes Bay, and up to Squirrel Cove. So that would be a suggested route. And, kind of much the same as what the Cluhus bus does, I guess, only that's kind of more on demand. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. And so there's pros and cons to a shuttle on Cortes, and it's very similar to the pros and cons to the bus on Quadra. So I won't get into that too much, but it's very similar. And, you sort of, it's great that you only need one driver to transport many people, but also maybe we don't have enough drivers available to operate a van and so on. So yeah, I think we've covered this in the previous options, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And then going to the next pilot project option is ride hailing on both islands. So ride hailing is a sort of a glorified taxi service. In case you weren't sure what ride hailing was, so it's hailing a ride using a phone rather than a street corner or calling up a dispatcher and saying, "Can you please send a taxi over?" So you're using an app on a phone. Is basically what we're thinking. And you can share it with, it's optional to share a ride with other riders, and you can also make several stops along a route. And I just included some of the options for ride hailing is Uber, there's Lyft, and there's actually a Vancouver Island one called Coastal Rides. And we've been in touch with the guy that started this. It's called, his name is Ryan, and we're talking about how we can bring coastal rides to our islands. And it's been an interesting conversation. So hopefully we can figure something out there. But I'll just drill down a little bit more into ride hailing. The pros of ride hailing is that it's a good way to attract drivers who want to earn a little bit of income and provide a service to the community. They use their own car, and it's reliable door-to-door service any time of the day or night, depending on driver availability. So the not so great things about ride hailing is that it's not super affordable for everybody because it's kind of close to the same cost as a taxi. Drivers must use their own cars, but the cars can't be any older than 10 years old by law. Drivers must have a Class 4 driver's license, and drivers and riders must have a cell phone, cell service, and a credit card. So, that's not everybody can take advantage of this type of passenger transportation, but it is something that a lot of people possibly could.
Can I just say, Kate, that there is an option with ride hailing to use someone else's car. So if you don't have a vehicle, or if your vehicle doesn't qualify because it's older than 10 years, you can actually use someone else's vehicle and they get part of the proceeds of the ride. So that's kind of cool.
That is really cool. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, we did discuss that with Ryan. I remember discussing that. That's a really good option for some people if they don't have the right kind of vehicle. Okay, I'm gonna move on to ride sharing, the last option of our possible pilot project. What is ride sharing? Well, it's basically carpooling. And space can be shared, and it may make stops to pick up other riders. And it's basically, a driver sharing, like if they're going somewhere, they're just going to look and see if anyone needs a ride and offer it to them. You need your phone with this option. There's a bunch of different apps that we're exploring, but I'll just move on to the next slide and get into that a little bit. So these are some of the apps. So there's Carpool World has an app for this, and they will actually allow you to customize the app according to whatever community you live in, which is kind of nice. Papa Ride, we looked at that one. And then there's Hover. So there's actually a few different Canadian options already. We wouldn't have to create our own app necessarily, but we're thinking maybe we will. We're not sure yet. So the good things about ride sharing and carpooling with an app is that it really incentivizes drivers to offer rides because riders help pay for expenses. So, the FOCI mirror tag program we had over on Cortes was great and everything, but the problem was that not enough drivers were really, it was kind of, you couldn't really plan around it because you didn't know who's going to show up with a mirror tag when you needed to go, and you needed to kind of plan around it. So this is a good way to plan your trip, and it incentivizes people to offer rides because they get a little bit of money to help pay for their expenses for driving their car. So so the good thing is that it uses existing infrastructure, which is drivers' cars. We don't have to, as a community, purchase a bus, which is like an extra infrastructure cost. We're just using infrastructure that's already there. It's more affordable than ride hailing because it's cheaper than taxis. Because as you'll see, it's just per kilometer. It's kind of a per kilometer thing. You pay per kilometer, like I'll get into that in the next slide, but it's between 35 cents per kilometer to about 70 cents per kilometer. But which turns out to be about $3 per trip, like if it's 10 kilometers or so. It can be door to door, which is, an advantage over a bus. And there's no restrictions on the age of the vehicle, as there is with ride hailing. And the trips can be offered to off-island destinations, so you can get to Campbell River that way. The disadvantages of using a ride-sharing app is that riders and drivers must have a cell phone, they must have cell service, and they have to have a credit card. So the rates, as I was saying before, need to be high enough to attract drivers. So, it can be negotiated. I think some of these apps, you can negotiate that. And the success of the service depends on enough drivers offering rides. So, it's kind of you're going into it not knowing if you're providing a reliable service or not, because you really don't know who's going to be offering rides, if there's going to be enough people doing that. So that was the end of the drilling down into those 4 options. And I just want to mention that the pilot project that we're proposing depends on funding. And we're looking at the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, which will be applied to by CCEDA for this pilot project. But there's potentially other funding available. So we're hoping that we can get what we need from the Rural Transit Solutions Fund for this pilot project. At this point, I just want to invite any questions you might have about the pilot project. There's just a bit more information we're going to get into, but if there's any questions, or you can ask questions later as well.
Yeah, there's quite a number of questions coming up in the chat, but I'm thinking maybe we should just finish the presentation since you're almost done. And
Okay.
then I could share the questions from the chat and we could take questions from the floor as well.
Okay, sounds good. I'll just finish up then if that's okay with everyone. There's not very much left here, so.
Yeah, you're almost done.
Okay. So again, I think you might have remembered that I recalled that I sort of mentioned that we spoke to a bunch of different focus groups and stakeholders for feedback over the summer months. We were supposed to have another community meeting in person, but you know what? It was just so hard to get people. It just made more sense to just go directly to invite people to participate in focus groups. And so that's kind of what we did. So again, you've seen this slide. These were the groups that we approached for feedback on our recommendations. Who's bus drivers, seniors, the boating community, advocates for low income and mobility challenge, like the food bank, healthcare workers, and family support, climate advocates, people who don't drive cars, youth and family representatives, outer island folks, and the Better at Home and Augmented Health program, who these 2 programs also offer transportation services. And just highlighting the feedback, for low income and mobility challenge folks, medical appointments and medication and food pickups are the most important reasons for passenger transportation. So, those programs are really important because these are like, basic needs that people are needing the transportation for. So we were really wanting to, check in with people that are needing transportation for those reasons. Someone made the comment that, actually more than one person made the comment that maybe not everyone has access to technology, but in terms of broad strokes, the technology is still a good option for many, and it makes transportation more affordable. And there are many programs, such as we were mentioning, Better at Home, to help some of the more vulnerable people in our community with their transportation challenges. And we'll always be working on trying to make things more accessible for everyone. And just from the climate perspective, there are huge advantages to using existing infrastructure to get people around, such as with the carpooling or ride hailing instead of a bus. So we do want to really consider those. And I think people are saying they want a bus mostly because that's what they're familiar with. But there are other ways of getting people around. And again, there is a lot of GHG emission reductions that can be realized by using existing infrastructures, which is other people's cars. And someone provided a really great example in Innisfil, Ontario, where they decided that they weren't going to spend a whole bunch of money on a bus, and they partnered with Uber, and they offer discounted rates to everyone. They realized the savings from not buying a bus, and they took those savings and they gave everyone a discount, basically subsidized the Uber service that they are providing to citizens. And you can get a limit of 30 rides per person per month at a discounted rate. So really innovative and interesting way to meet people's transportation needs in this day and age of Uber and technology. The visitor community, the visiting boater community, the yacht clubs, the government docks are frequented by tourists all summer long. And the most asked question is there a taxi or bus to get around the island? This is more the case on Cortes. Boaters want access to food outlets, stores, and markets on the island. It's a really condensed time of the year from June to September. And providing transportation to the boater community really helps our local economy because it gets these people to the markets, to the food outlets. It really brings money into our community. So it is important to offer some kind of transportation to this community. Little bit of feedback about the Klahoose bus. It's highly valued on Cortes. It's used by all residents, not just the residents of the Klahoose First Nation. It's used by all sorts of different people, including people that have cars, because it's a very reliable way to get to medical appointments in Campbell River on time instead of driving your own car. And many people commented that they would like to see additional days of the Klahoose bus. Right now, it only operates 2 times per week. And I checked in with the Klahoose and First Nation, and they said that they really want to offer more days, but they're just really quite busy with quite a few projects going on. It's something that's definitely on their radar. So maybe we can look forward to more days of the week with the Klahoose bus. And just a note about existing services. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm so lame with PowerPoint. I can't get back to that slide, but we already mentioned a whole bunch of different services that are already in existence, including Better at Home, Augmented Home program for people with medical appointments and just people who are having a hard time getting around, seniors. There's also, in case you didn't know, there's a program that I discovered that I didn't know about. It's called Wheels for Wellness, and it's a free transportation service for people who have medical services on Vancouver Island. You can get from Campbell River down to Nanaimo or Victoria for free for any of your medical appointments. So I think just a lot of these services need to be better advertised. So that's just going to help us in meeting some of our transportation needs if we can just get people to know these a bit better. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm just going to I do welcome your questions. This is the last slide, just to point you in the direction of the more information about the project, and to I can put my email address in the chat. And this is our transportation project team: Jen Banks-Dahl, Steve Earle from Gabriola, Lisa Ferrentinos from Cortes, Sadhu Johnson from Cortes, and myself with CCEDA. So thanks so much for watching this presentation, and I look forward to your questions.
So Kate, I think I'm going to give you a little bit of a break because I know you probably want to catch your breath. And I'm just going to start going through these questions, and we can both answer them. And even Lisa can jump in because she might want to answer some of these questions too. So I'm just going to go through the ones in the chat, and then we can take some from the floor, if that's okay with everyone. And if I read out your question and you had something to add, please jump in. So Jenny was the first one. She said, no door-to-door service. So that refers to the bus. So would you allow customer drop off or only at bus stops? And, you know, from talking to community buses on other islands, they typically do drop off and, you know, basically hailing the driver. So they're not restricted only to the bus stops. It's just a general rule that as the driver goes along, you can flag them down and then you can ask to be let off. So that's generally how they operate. And hopefully we'll be able to operate like that here in our communities. Lori asks, car sharing with ride hailing would certainly open up that platform to more drivers. So yes, ride hailing is legislated and carpooling or ride sharing is legislated. And for ride hailing, you can share a ride. So that's often up to you when you're booking a ride. You can say whether you're willing to share a ride. And the ride is generally cheaper if you're willing to share it with other passengers. Kristen asks, is there an example of the ride sharing model working on a rural island or community? So I think she's probably referring to using an app. And, you know, ride sharing using an app is a new thing. So I've had a number of young people volunteering at my farm this summer, and then they go on a rideshare app and they find a ride to the next place they want to go. So I don't know that it's happening using an app so much in rural communities. We don't have the answer to that. So I would be curious to know, but it does seem to be the way that ride sharing is being done now. And it makes it, when you have an app to facilitate ride sharing, it just makes it a lot more accessible and, you know, easy to find a ride if people are using the app, of course. So Dwayne says it would be nice to research more for a propane or veggie oil vehicle, mechanical and operational emissions, etc. determinations. So we actually heard about some community buses on other islands that have used veggie oil. And I'm trying to recall, it may even have been the bus on Gabriola that ran on that for a while. And then they really had a hard time finding a good supply. Now, it could be that here we would be able to find a good supply and it could work, but
I think it was on Jen.
what was it?
The Hornby bus, I think.
Hornby bus? Okay, yeah, I can't quite recall, but we could certainly look into that. Or a propane bus. But we certainly, in terms of electrical bus, that's kind of the way things are going. And there is funding out there to purchase electrical buses. It's just that it's only now that they're becoming easier to service. Apparently, a lot of companies that made electric buses have since gone out of business. So it makes it really difficult to service those vehicles or to even to have them under warranty. Sandy asks, for ride sharing, is there some kind of quality control of drivers? For example, reference checks. And I think Mel answered that by saying for Papa Ride, riders must provide personal details and pay an initial fee. And then not sure about drivers, but likely also registered. So there is some quality control through the app, but it's certainly not as stringent as ride hailing, which is not as stringent as a bus. So there is more risk there, but depending on the app you use, you can build in a review method so that you can review the drivers just like they do on Uber and give some feedback. But I think there's things that we could tweak if we do these things here. Ginny said, please repeat the name of it was Wheels for Wellness. Yeah, there it is. Kate put it in the chat, and that's for everyone. It's not just for seniors. Everyone can access Wheels for Wellness. It's not on Cortes or Quadra though. You need to go catch the ferry over and they'll pick you up in Campbell River. And it is by donation. Okay, Edward just said great work. Dwayne says seasonal residential or tourist minuscule taxation revenue model. with that support seasonal access resources on our growing base here on Cortes Island. Everything helps. I think, yeah, there are other ways to consider how to pay for this, especially if we do a pilot, it would be much easier to then make the case for it to then eventually go on the tax roll. So in other communities, they are using the tax base to help pay, as well as a lot of grants. So all over Canada, passenger transportation is subsidized when it comes to a bus. You know, the fares that we pay on a bus don't actually cover the cost. And for the Glahoose, like the fares that are paid by customers don't pay the cost. The Glahoose is highly subsidizing the Glahoose bus. So it is really important to have other sources of funding for those kinds of services. Okay, Eric asks, is CCEDA planning to be the operator of a shuttle bus, or more so just hoping to help line up the funding and get it off the ground? And then is there a budget in mind for the purchase of a vehicle and also for the spring and summer operation? Kate, are you able to answer that as a representative of CCEDA?
Yeah, sure. So I was just replying in the chat that
Yeah.
CCEDA is going to be applying for money for the pilot, but we won't be in the business of offering like a transportation service in the long term. We just want to see what happens with that pilot. And yeah, and so we are going to be looking for, a bus. Maybe we should talk to you, Eric, about your action bus. But yeah, we just, I don't think that we're looking at purchasing anything. We're just going to be like looking for like a rental, which is going to be really expensive. But yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at. I hope that answers the question.
But on Cortes, you want to use the Hollyhock bus and partner with them. So that would be amazing.
Yeah, one of the things about buses is that you can't just have one. You got to have like a backup bus. And so we're not sure how we're going to meet that because there's only one Hollyhock van, right? And so,
Okay.
yeah, just not sure what we're going to do with that and what the size of the vehicle will be.
All right, so let's open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions or feedback to provide to us or to ask each other? Because there's a lot of people here who have a lot of experience with different forms of transportation.
Oh, Dwayne.
Oh yeah, just
Yeah.
sort of have a just sort of have an opinion, I guess, just to speak a little bit more to about about back in the day. This seems eons ago, where where propane was kind of like the in thing around the early '80s. I think I recall I recall for at least 2 years renting renting a PA system that came with a big van that was ran on propane and we went all over BC and never broke down. Was really economical. So I'm thinking propane should take a little bit more focus on that because it just seemed to be really dependable and it was just like it was I guess I think it was a conversion, right? I mean, you just take a regular van and convert it into propane. So I'm sort of thinking that as a sort of a startup, sort of more economical approach to looking at that possibility might I don't know, might be a good one.
Yeah, one thing we're learning about a lot of the community buses that have gone on Gabriola, I guess we're talking like Denman and Hornby, the cost of maintaining buses is a huge expense. It's not to be underestimated. And so like I guess Gabriola, they decided they just had gas, but right now they're purchasing electric buses because they've really proved themselves. They've been going for about 10 years now. So if we did go with something alternative, we're thinking more along the lines of electric. But for the pilot project, we're kind of being told just go with the status quo, like just go with gas because you don't want to invest too much into something that's just a temporary thing. And it's, if we can get a rental an electric rental, then that would be really great. But Hornby, they just have a school bus, an old school bus that they drive around, and I think that's the one that was using the veggie oil. And I think that they found it. I mean, I think that's a labor of love for them. They only have one bus, so when it goes down, there's no transportation, and so they do need a backup. But I think that you do want to be really careful about what kind of a vehicle you get, because it needs to be reliable and you need a backup. So, you don't want to have to really rely on volunteers and that kind of thing too much to be fixing things. And you can't have a lot of downtime, because you really need people to use the service and get hooked on it and make it a part of their regular routine. So as much as I love the idea of using alternative things, I would be worried about maintenance on a remote island and so on. But I love the idea of using veggie oil and so on. I don't know where we would get the veggie oil if we did do a veggie oil ban, but I really appreciate the creativity, Dwayne.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne. Does anyone else have a question or a comment or a suggestion?
I have a thought to
Yeah, Heidi.
contribute as someone who's like completely not involved with this project and has no personal history in transport planning. I could suggest maybe wheel service to run could depend a lot on what the funding sources are. So I don't know if you know what those funding sources are yet. So it's challenging to plan to plan. So for instance, if we have a lot more capital funding, then you'd be able to buy an electric bus, which then has much lower operations cost. Whereas if you had much capital funding.
Yeah, Heidi, you're cutting in and out.
But a lot more operations budget, then you can go for like a ride sharing. So I'm so different place.
Okay.
So I was going to say, if we have lots of like capital cost but not much operational cost, then buy a brand new electric bus, and that's expensive up front but cheap to run. Whereas if we have lots more operational cost but lots less like capital budget, then do something like ride sharing, where it's much cheaper to set up, but you have to pay lots of drivers constantly to make the thing operate. So the question of what kind of vehicle to use or what kind of service to run is probably going to be really shaped by where the funding's coming from and whether you're going to have more upfront or operations costs available to you. So I don't know if that came through at all. Sorry if I just wasted.
Yeah, no, that was great on the reprise. So yeah, that's so true. And we've heard that with the upcoming provincial election, there is going to be a whole bunch of funding announced for passenger transportation, because it's just the government has climate change, climate adaptation targets to meet. And so they're putting money into things that help people reduce their emissions and their carbon footprint. So now whether they would help pay for something related to ride sharing or ride hailing, we don't know, but we do know that often they are willing to pay for capital costs for a bus. So that may be our best way of getting funding through a government grant, but then the community may say they really want something else, and we can raise money in the community for something else. So I think the idea in the pilot is just to try a bunch of different things and see what people like and what works for the culture in our communities and the population, and then go from there. So yeah, I mean, certainly people here are used to having a taxi, and a lot of people just like that option. So, it could be that having a ride hailing is really popular, but we'll have to see. Anyone else want to speak?
I just got a quick question. Kate, has anyone had a chat with Island Link?
No chats with Island Link. You know, their service is pretty clear. I mean, it's a great service, although, you know, they don't let kids on there that are 9 years old or less, so it is kind of limited for some people. I find that when I go to use it, it's kind of full. What were you thinking in terms of like just connections with Island Link type of thing?
Not, having a conversation about it's kind of like more of an economic management conversation about.
Mhm.
They started with one, and now they're all over the island. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe there is a pondering interest to have a look at it, but it's kind of more of an inquiry because if you started with one bus and then there was two and now there's 10, what was that business model that company used to just to do a startup and become successful? I mean, it's seeming like it is an island. The Quadra and Cortes are islands, and it'd be nice to have a conversation just to see what business models work and are they still working? Are they still going to work today? And just sort of get some sort of indication that if we're going to look at developing a business model, a seasonal business model for Quadra and or Cortes, then we'd kind of like to be more informed about at least making a knowledgeable decision on potential developments of post pilot project.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you, and that's partly why we invited Steve Earle from the Gabriola bus onto our team, is because they've been operating their community bus for quite a while, and you know, it's more like a community bus. But Island Link, yeah, I would love to know a bit about their fleet management and so on. It's a good point, Dwayne. We should probably yeah, check in with those guys for sure. Yeah, because they probably have reasons about why, for example, they don't allow, I don't know, kids on their bus. I don't know. There's probably, yeah, they just don't have the human resources to maybe just to deal with children. I don't know, but yeah, there's probably a lot that we could learn from them as well. Yeah.
So Ginny asked about next steps. And so right now, our final report for the grant that funded this project is due at the end of this month. So we only have a few more weeks to pull that together. So tonight is our last meeting and our last sort of reaching out to the community for feedback and suggestions, although certainly people are totally free to email us or call us after the meeting. And then Kate's in the process of writing a grant application because the CCEDA board has given her permission to go ahead and apply. So those are the next steps, the immediate next steps. And then T says that Nelson has a car sharing co-op. I saw the cars, but not sure how they operate. And that's not something that we explored because this project was funded by the government specifically for passenger transportation, so not for things where you're driving yourself or frankly for bikes or anything like that. But I think something like a car share co-op could be really useful here. So it just wasn't within the purview of the funding for this project, but I think all these things can be explored. And Jude has raised her hand. So Jude, do you have a question or suggestion?
Well, I was just kind of curious because we have 3 organizations that are trying to help seniors, and they don't have enough drivers.
Mhm.
And if we had the some kind of setup where people ask for rides, although a lot of the seniors probably or might not have the technology, so maybe the rides could be planned through either Better at Home or NavCare, and then some kind of, I don't know, there might even be able to be some kind of sharing of costs between the organization and that kind of thing. But it just seems like that would be some kind of a mutual helping thing there. Because part of the problem is not being able to pay. Just volunteers are doing all the transportation. And if they're not available, or, then it kind of falls through the cracks. But if you have someone who is doing the job more consistently, and the coordination is with some of the agencies to set up the rides, then they may be more consistent. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I think when I talked to Kelly, and Kelly, please correct me when I'm wrong, but if I'm wrong, Better at Home uses volunteer drivers and reimburses them for gas and things like
Right.
that. But if there was a taxi or a ride hailing service on Quadra, Better at Home would be able to hire the taxi to provide a ride. Is that correct, Kelly?
Right.
Ah, here.
Yeah. So in
Oh, wow.
theory,
Okay.
so people who do ride hailing or taxi services, and it's now being legislated that they have to make a certain minimum wage. And so it's not, and so they're making a wage, and it can't just be, very minimal, because a lot of these drivers in other places, they're making very little money to do these kinds of jobs. So now it's being legislated that they have to be paid a certain amount. So that might be a more compelling thing. You're not a volunteer driver, you are making more money to provide rides. So yeah, I think we're gonna have to see what works and what we can find people to actually provide here, because I think we want to recruit some younger drivers. A lot of the drivers, like Kelly said, they're having health issues. A lot of them are aging they're aging themselves, and they
Yeah.
are probably at the point where they would like someone else to drive them. So we need to tap into younger drivers.
Yeah, something else that I've realized with talking to a few people who have taken advantage of the NavCare visiting services and they want to go to the program is that they're seniors, and they feel really like they're putting someone out. They don't want to rely on a volunteer. They
Okay.
feel really bad. And so it's actually, I'm realizing that more and more as I kind of dig in with certain individuals that we're trying to get out and get them into the community to be social and to combat the loneliness. It's the anxiety piece of calling on someone in the community that they don't really know and then asking them to drive them. So they want to leave money. They would rather call a cab. And these people would rather call a cab because they don't want to lose. I think it's the sense of, I mean, I can relate to it a little bit. I'm not in that age bracket yet, but I can understand it's the sense of having your freedom and your say, your choice, and your pride, your mobility, all of it gets wrapped up into a ride. So it's important because our population is aging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. I wasn't aware of that. I was actually listening to the radio and I heard about a program where they actually make sure that people know that it's okay to ask your driver if you can take them out for lunch. And like very similar, probably a thing, like it's something, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you can ask the driver if you can take them out for lunch. Like that's a thing. So make sure
Yeah.
that you can take your driver out for lunch, that whole thing.
Yeah, so different people have different needs. Like Mel commented, the introverted semi-anonymity of a cab as well. So some people like riding the bus. We heard about this from other communities, including Gabriola, that the bus is like this real social event where people get on the bus and the driver knows everyone, and it's kind of like a social worker, because if someone doesn't show up for, on a day they usually take the bus, then they get someone to check on that person. So there's that potential on a bus, but there's also the potential to ride a bus and be kind of anonymous. And so, yeah, maybe ride hailing or taxi is kind of more, like Mel said, more of an introverted option than maybe a ride sharing.
It's more private.
But ride sharing, I mean, for example, like if Jude were to drive in from Granite Bay to go to a program, and she could pick up a few people along the way, and they would basically help pay for her gas, or between all of them pay for her gas. So she's the driver and everyone else is covering her gas. Like, that would be a huge incentive for Jude to drive those people, or potentially a huge incentive for Jude. I shouldn't speak for her, but it could be. So yeah, so I think there's pros and cons, like Kate was saying, to all these different options. And it is nice to be able to have a selection and then sort of see what people are drawn to.
Absolutely.
Sandy says, I know many who just don't feel comfortable about having to ask for a ride. Yeah, for sure. And so
Definitely.
maybe a bus, even for those people, a bus might be the best option. Yeah.
Dwayne, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Yeah, I'm just I guess just a general comment that might allow us to have an opportunity for a conversation about and this is strictly through an Indigenous lens about you know Indigenous communities always have the challenge, especially smaller communities, much like Clahous, who are always forever entrenched in capacity, looking at moving forward in good and meaningful ways. So having said that, looking at creating an economic base, it's always meaningful to also have social development in the equation. So I'm liking the idea and looking at the possibility. I mean, we cannot have a healthy, growing economy without healthy people as well. So in far as looking what we talk about, and having some meaningful conversations about social development, about looking at getting a I guess we could call a motivational or incentive matrix to assist residents, remote local residents, to have that opportunity to capacity build. I mean, because anything that we do when we're jumping in one of these vehicles, you need a class 4. I mean, to me, that's an opportunity to look at capacity building. Somebody that will always forever need, someone with a class 4, whether you're living on Cortes Island or whether you're looking at making a fast buck or getting a job into, say, with a cab company in Campbell River or something. And class 4 is very incentive and very motivational certification to have. So if we were to look at that possibility of putting that in the equation for someone who likes driving, maybe not necessarily on Cortes, but to be able to be trained specifically for whether maybe a cab, bus, or van, or what have you. So I was sort of thinking that if that were to be put in the equation for a certain degree of seasonal opportunities for seasonal employment, driving passengers around, I think is should be put in the discussion.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Dwayne. Yeah, great point. And then Heidi says, for passengers of all ages, I think buses give more freedom, agency, and predictability than a ride hail, car share, or taxi. But because you can just go to the stop route at the scheduled time and the vehicle shows up, buses also provide a huge environmental advantage as far as more people get to travel per vehicle. Yeah, great points. Anyone else want to? Oh,
Yeah.
Kate?
Wanted to say, Dwayne, like the skills training around that, we could definitely let people know about that. And there's opportunities to bring that to communities, the training around getting your class 4. Yeah, for sure.
Eric has a question or a suggestion. Eric?
Yeah, just wanted to echo Dwayne's comment there. I think there's definitely value in having, like local folks on the island with potentially some work, as opposed to the sort of like the ride hailing and that kind of thing. Definitely in favor of that. And I think overall definitely interested in like helping with any kind of the the ideas and the concepts of this. Yeah, I spent a decent time of my own time on Cortes and often hitchhiking when I'm over. So yeah, I understand the need for it. Yeah, I think a project like this can get off the ground with pretty limited funding. So I'm not too sure who's like on the call that's going to be kind of working on like the pilot side of things. But I think with some like, you know, collaborating with the groups that do exist already, yeah, I think it's like definitely doable, whether there's like proper funding available for new vehicles, or if there isn't. I think as long as there's interest, I think it's very possible to do a pilot project, and I'd be more than happy to help with that, getting that going. And we could send an old biodiesel bus over just for a month just to see if it works, you know? Especially in the spring when things aren't too busy. Yeah, just a
Yeah,
thought. Yeah.
great. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I think I've got your email address, so maybe I'll reach out and we can talk about that some more, because like I'm the one doing the the application for the pilot. So
Cool.
it's in the works. We really I'm gonna have to look at a few different scenarios to see what we can afford with the money that's available. So yeah, it'd be nice to know yeah, how much you would how much we could use your bus for if it comes down to that. That'd be great to know.
Yeah, cool. Or even, yeah, it could help acquire something or whatever, you know. Yeah, like I said, I'm coming from a nonprofit kind of organization, so I'm not too worried about, you know, whether it's us or not. But I think the model that we've got has worked well, in terms of like a very low budget. Like we've never actually even gotten any grants, well, or very few donations over the years. So it's definitely doable. Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
on. I
And
guess we
one thing that you do, Eric, with your bus is the charters, like, or I guess you call them charters, but some of the other community buses too, hey, do as well, like for events or weddings or different things to make extra money.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a bit of the difference. We don't run a regular shuttle,
Mm-hmm.
which is slightly different. But yeah, we've kind of just run off of like a by donation model for charters. Kind of the history of our group is just about getting kind of like environmental groups, sort of helping them get out of the city and stuff like that. And now it's shifted more into, you know, we're helping with like music festivals and yeah, and weddings and staff parties and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I think being able to operate on like something that's very scalable, like a bus doesn't need to cost a ton. You know, yeah, it does. It can be operated like on a bit of a shoestring, and I think having a project that's scalable is possible. You know.
I was just
That's
gonna
really good to hear.
we've got like a French fry, a burger barn on the island that he probably generates a lot of French fry oil. Maybe we should check in with him.
Right. Yeah,
And there's
totally.
Cove Side. Well, there's a bunch of restaurants here on Quadra, so hey,
Yeah.
we could look into that for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, probably enough to run on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep eating your French fries, everyone. Yeah.
I remember seeing like a veggie oil or van parked behind a KFC one time.
Nice. Just waiting till the end. Yeah.
It's just like another idea, Kate. I'm thinking of, now that we're thinking about buses, just seems to be at the top of my head. I think I remember that because I worked up at Homalco Bear Tours for 6 months or so, doing first aid, and once in a while I had to, when they were at full capacity, sometimes I had to do tours, and the roads to the towers were just like so bad and incredibly, it's just like it was just a chore even to try to navigate in some of these roads that are really rough. Um, what I could probably get is some more information about, because they certainly aren't going to be worse than any of the roads and the potholes here in Cortes. But my thoughts are is that I think recently that Jamalco has upgraded, like they're, because I see they've upgraded. And there's still just like about 2 or 3 buses left behind the Jamalco community, and I don't know, maybe they're for sale, maybe they're for repairs. But it'd be nice to find out how much it it cost them in one season or two, to see how much it costs, what type of repairs did these buses need, what kind of repairs, how much did it cost, and which were the most dependable buses, especially in those type of working conditions. So with, because our roads are getting even worse here on Cortes, so I'm thinking that probably would give us kind of more of a ballpark, getting it down to more of a ballpark figure of how much would cost to purchase and how much would cost for repairs for the project, even just in one season alone. I think that might be a good idea, just to sort of inquire about that.
Oh, those are great ideas for
Yeah.
our budget.
Yeah, no, I think we've got some good information from Gabriola. Again, they've been doing the community bus for a few years, and they do have some good information, good data on that. And I'll definitely be looking at that for my budget. Yeah, and we also have another bus on, like, Hollyhock has been talking to us about using their bus for their van for the pilot next year. And also there's a gal on Quadra who's has a van who would be willing to operate it on Quadra. So that's really great. We've got a couple of good options just for the pilot we're talking, right? The more longer term project that we go with, we don't know what that's going to be yet. We're just trying to see what the pilot, what information we can get from the pilot.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to talk to the Homolco and find out about their experience as well. Absolutely. Okay, there's an ongoing chat happening, which is awesome. But we should wrap up fairly soon. So does anyone else have another question?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
you gotta go. Okay,
I
thanks,
don't know if
Eric.
that's the best way to say it. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Sorry.
There's a few people we haven't heard from yet. So is there anyone else who wanted to ask a question or share a suggestion?
I'm going to sign off, but I'd really like to thank you for the deep digging that you guys have done to explore everything about every option that you've brought up. It's been really awesome to listen to. So the future's looking bright. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lori.
I'm also grateful for all the work that's been done on this project, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the pilots go forward next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We are too. This whole conversation is making it feel more real. Yeah. The more you talk about it, the more it's likely to happen. Maybe that's, yeah, it's kind of, what do they call that? The more you manifesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah.
I
Anyone
might
else?
sign off too. I think
Okay.
I'm gonna head out. Thanks so much, you guys. Great work. I'm excited.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, bye.
Oh, Shane Pollard is still here. Shane, do you have anything to share on behalf of like the Weewakai in terms of thoughts or experiences or suggestions?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good topic to bring up. I'm sure it's been brought up in the village over there. I would have to figure out who would be in charge of that within the nation. But yeah, it is a good topic to discuss.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get in touch and we can keep the conversation going. I know I reached out to Jonathan Shakite, the new counselor from Cape Mudge, and we're trying to meet, but it's just been such a busy time the last few weeks. So it hasn't happened yet. He's been fishing and those kinds of things. But yeah, we're hoping to talk about what might be possible.
Okay, yeah, he'd be a good person to get in contact with too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so maybe we'll wrap it up, and thanks so much to everyone for being here. It's really great to see all your faces, and all your feedback has been really great. And you can look forward to look for advertisements around our final report, and I'd be happy to send it to you. And it'll also be available on social media and on the Tideline and whatever Quadra Island outlets there are. So please look out for that. And we're going to wrap it up in the next couple weeks. So we're looking forward to doing that and getting
Yeah.
into the next steps for the pilot.
And there's also a ton of information on the CCEDA website on the transportation project page. And we'll continue to update that.
All right.
Thanks so much, everybody, for their wonderful work. It's very intriguing.
Thanks so much, Dwayne.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming and for staying till the end. That's amazing.
Thank you so much to all of the organisers for your ongoing organising.
Society.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Shane.
you. Mel K, are you still there? Maybe they stepped away from the phone. I can just remove them.
Ah,
All right. I was just copying
Right.
and pasting the chat just in case, it didn't do it. But do you want to stop the recording? Do you know how to do that?